We saw record high average rents in October all across Canada. Which province had the highest rent? Which one saw the biggest jump? What were the top 10 cities in terms of rent prices? Which unit type saw the biggest rent increase? We are going to look into all that today based on the latest Rentals.ca report. Number 1. Provincial overview. Where can you find the cheapest rent in Canada? In October, the average listed rent for studios was only $824, and even 3 bedrooms were below $2,000. That's in Manitoba, with Winnipeg being its most famous city. The rent increase by unit type is very interesting. Average studio rent actually dropped 21% year over year. 1 bedroom up 1%, 2 bedroom up 6%, and 3 bedroom up 9%. You can see that Winnipeg is not a very popular choice for young singles, and I think it is because of the limited job opportunities. Saskatchewan, another Prairie province, is similar to Manitoba. Its average 3-bedroom rent was the lowest across Canada, only $1,430. The third Prairie province, Alberta, with Calgary being its biggest city. Calgary's low property price have been attracting real estate investors over there in the recent couple years. More people are also moving over there for the same reason, and the popularity was reflected in the rent increases. Alberta saw the biggest rent growth in Canada in October. Studios up 6%. Both 1 and 2 bedroom were up 16%. 3 bedroom up 15%. In terms of the absolute rent, Alberta was still the third lowest in the country, with studio rents at $1,046 and 3-bedroom rents at $1,893. Over the longer term, it will be important to see if the job opportunities in Alberta will be enough to keep attracting people into the province for a continuous growth. Now, we are going to see a jump in rent prices when we get to Quebec and Nova Scotia. In Quebec, average studio rent were at around $1,500 and 3-bedroom rent at around $2,400. We also saw double-digit rent increases in 1 and 2 bedroom units. Nova Scotia had similar rent compared to Quebec, but Nova Scotia actually saw a 10% decrease in studio rent, but a huge 28% increase in 1 bedroom rent and 19% increase in 2 bedroom rents. 3 bedroom rent stayed flat. And the main reason for the rent surge is population growth. The Nova Scotia government made a big push for increased immigration. There were also inter-provincial migration. For example, people moving from Ontario to Nova Scotia for a lower living cost. We saw that the average 1-bedroom rent in the Prairie provinces was roughly $1,250. It jumped to around $1,800 when we got to Quebec and Nova Scotia. Ready for another jump? It is going to be above $2,200 for a 1-bedroom unit. You bet. Ontario and British Columbia. In Ontario, average studio rent was already above $1,800 and 3-bedroom was above $3,000. The rent increases were kept below 10% and more or less the same as all unit types. And finally, the most expensive province in Canada, British Columbia. Average studio rents were almost $2,000 and 3-bedroom reaching almost $3,500. The rent increases were very steep as well, with double-digit increase for all unit types except studios. If we were to draw one conclusion for all these data, it would be Canada is struggling with very steep rent inflation. And it is because of the reasons we always discussed. Housing demand created by very high immigration, people shifting from the ownership market to the rental market because of the high interest rates. Landlord shifting part of the increased mortgage cost to the tenant. You see, the Bank of Canada wanted to lower inflation by increasing the interest rate. But a byproduct of that is actually a very steep rent inflation. Number 2, ranking by city. Let's take a look at the top 10 most expensive cities in Canada based on the average rent of a one-bedroom unit. They are all in Ontario and British Columbia. By the way, if you like this kind of video, we go outside of Toronto and take a look at the bigger picture of Canada overall. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you keep getting more and more knowledge. The city ranking number 10, Burlington, with an average one-bedroom rent of $2,200. That's a 5.7% increase from last year. Number 9, Guelph, 8.5% increase from last year. Number 8, Etobicoke, 5.7% increase. Number 7, Richmond Hill, with one-bedroom rent reaching almost $2,300, up 16.2%. Number 6, Markham, $2,324, a huge 27.5% increase year over year. Number 5, Mississauga, up 15.5%. Number 4, Oakville, with one-bedroom rent just above $2,500, up 16.6%. Number 3, Toronto, over $2,600 for a one-bedroom, but the increase is only 4.9% from last year. The rent inflation in the city of Toronto was relatively small because the rent was already very high and people were looking for more affordable options in the suburbs. As you can see, that really jacked up the rent in the suburbs, narrowing the gap between Toronto and the suburbs. If you think the rent is very high in Toronto, let's go to BC. In the number 2 position, we have Burnaby, with average one-bedroom rent at $2,700, up 22.4% from last year. Number 1, you bet, Vancouver, $2,976 for a one-bedroom unit, up 10.1% year over year. $3,000 for one bedroom is very expensive indeed. As a comparison, Calgary ranked number 23, with one-bedroom rent at $1,730, almost half the price of Vancouver. The cheapest city in Canada is Saskatchewan, just over $1,000 for a one-bedroom unit, 1/3 the price of Vancouver. So there are definitely more affordable options in Canada, but when you factor in the weather, the lifestyle, the opportunities, you can see why the most expensive cities continue the most popular, and that's why they remain very expensive. It is a chicken and egg problem. As we are moving into winter, the rental market is slowing down, and we have to lower the rent in order to minimize the vacancy period. So there will be some relief on rent increases. We will have to see how the rental market unfolds when things start to pick up again in spring 2024. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you always stay on top of the market.